You have a dominant side. Everyone does. You write with one hand, lead with one leg, favor one arm when you reach for something. This is normal. What's not normal, and what most people never address, is what that dominance does to your strength, your muscle development, and your injury risk when you train with it unchecked for months and years. Your dominant side is quietly running the show in almost every exercise you do. And the weaker side is quietly falling further behind every single session. Here's what's actually happening, and why fixing it is one of the highest leverage things you can do for your long-term strength and symmetry. 1. Dominance creates compensation in every bilateral movement. A bilateral movement is any exercise where both sides work simultaneously: pull-ups, push-ups, squats, dips. The assumption is that both sides contribute equally. They don't. Your dominant side is neurologically more efficient, it recruits motor units faster, fires them more synchronously, and produces force more readily than your non-dominant side. In any bilateral movement, your dominant side picks up a disproportionate share of the load without you feeling it or seeing it. This happens below the level of conscious awareness. You're not choosing to use your right side more during a pull-up. Your nervous system is simply defaulting to the most efficient available pathway, which is always the dominant side. Over time, the dominant side gets stronger. The non-dominant side gets relatively weaker. The gap widens with every session. And the bilateral movements you think are training both sides equally are actually training one side more than the other, consistently, invisibly, for as long as you've been training. 2. The imbalance shows up in your posture before it shows up in your performance. Most people don't notice a strength imbalance until it's significant, when one arm visibly fails before the other, or when one side of their back is clearly more developed. But the imbalance is written into your posture long before it becomes visible in the mirror. Your dominant side typically has tighter muscles, higher resting tone, and more compressed joints, because it's been working harder for longer. Your non-dominant side typically has looser muscles, lower tone, and relatively hypermobile joints, because it's been underloaded. This asymmetry in muscle tone creates postural deviations that are visible if you know what to look for. One shoulder sitting higher. One hip tilting. The spine curving subtly toward the dominant side under load. These aren't aesthetic problems. They are mechanical ones. A spine that curves under load is distributing force unevenly across discs and facet joints. A shoulder that sits higher is compressing the subacromial space on one side. Every rep performed with existing asymmetry reinforces that asymmetry, and adds compressive load to structures that are already carrying more than their share. 3. Your non-dominant side has a ceiling that's lower than you realize. Here's the performance consequence that matters most to people who train seriously. Your strength in any bilateral movement is ultimately limited by your weaker side. Your nervous system will not allow one side to produce force that the other side cannot stabilize against. This is a protective mechanism. It prevents joints from being destabilized by asymmetric force production during bilateral loading. What this means in practice: your pull-up max, your push-up max, your squat depth, all of these are being capped by your non-dominant side's capacity. The dominant side has more to give. It's being held back. And the only way to raise the ceiling on your bilateral performance is to bring the non-dominant side up to match it. Most people try to fix this by training harder overall. It doesn't work. Training bilaterally harder just gives the dominant side more opportunities to compensate. The non-dominant side never gets the isolated loading it needs to actually develop. 4. Unilateral training is the only real fix. Unilateral means one side at a time. Archer push-ups. Single arm rows. Bulgarian split squats. Pistol squat progressions. Single leg hip hinges. These movements remove the dominant side's ability to compensate, because the non-dominant side has to handle the load alone. The rule is simple and non-negotiable. Always start with your non-dominant side. Complete the full set. Then match, not exceed, that number of representatives with your dominant side. Whatever the non-dominant side can do sets the ceiling for both sides that session. This forces the non-dominant side to do real work at its actual capacity instead of hiding behind the dominant side's efficiency. The strength gap closes faster than most people expect. The nervous system adapts quickly when given isolated demand. 4 to 6 weeks of consistent unilateral work typically produces visible symmetry improvement and measurable bilateral strength gains, because the limiting factor was the weaker side, and you finally addressed it directly. 5. The assessment you should do right now. Single arm hang from a bar. Dominant side first, time how long you can hold. Then non-dominant side. The gap between those two numbers is your imbalance index. Anything beyond 15% difference is significant and is actively limiting your bilateral pulling strength. Then do 10 push-ups and film yourself from the front. Watch which shoulder drops first. Watch which hip rotates. Watch which elbow flares. Your body will tell you exactly where the compensations are, you just have to give it a movement to perform and actually watch what happens. The dominant side isn't your asset. It's your liability, as long as it's masking a weaker side that never gets the chance to develop on its own terms. Fix the gap. The bilateral strength you've been chasing comes from the side you've been ignoring. Fitness doesn't need more influencers selling shortcuts, it needs better explanations. If this video helped you understand the science behind bodyweight training, hit like, subscribe to Iron Monk, and comment below with a fitness claim you've heard that doesn't hold up under scrutiny.